I'm Dave Wierzal, and you're watching PHTV4 Spotlight. Today's Spotlight is on birding for the fall and winter of 2023. And on my right, we've got Mel Tracy, who owns Wild Birds Unlimited with his wife Laura in Palos Park. And Mel, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you, yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, I always love coming out. I mean, you have a great store. You have a lot of great holiday things. Definitely come out and check that. I mean, certainly for bird stuff, but you got a lot of great things here too. But you know, talking about fall 2023, before we get into it and what that means, last year we spent a little bit of time talking about avian flu. Is that still an issue in the environment, or where are we at?
No, there's not been any real avian flu lately, but there were some people who had West Nile. So some of the blue jays, unfortunately, and I talked to Willbrook, which is the rehab center out there, in DuPage, and they had quite a bit of West Nile, but that's mosquitoes, so as mosquito season ends, that'll go away.
Okay, so the season coming up looks pretty good then.
Yeah, it does, yeah. And when I say they had a lot of cases, it was like, 20 birds. It wasn't like,
Right, not an epidemic.
Not epidemic proportions, right.
Okay, all right, so that's good news. Then how about, let's talk about, I guess, like migration is in progress now. Can you talk about like what birds are migrating, when they're migrating, and then also for people who have backyard feeders, what they might be putting out when, or time to not put stuff out anymore?
This is like a 9-part question, right?
Yeah, you got them all? Yeah, I'm not repeating it.
Let's start with migration. So usually mid-October, there's something weird shows up almost every year. So we're not quite to mid-October yet, but we did have flamingos. I don't know if you saw that in the news. Yeah, there's a family of 5 flamingos turned up in Milwaukee. So, and that happens sometimes with hurricane season. These birds are trying to kind of avoid the heavy winds, and so they start going, and that just ended up in Milwaukee. Now, I know there were some people from around here went and saw them, but I don't know where they are. They kind of like disappeared again. But so there's always something interesting to see in migration, and Laura and Liz do a great job on Instagram and Facebook of putting things out there. So when something does turn up, Laura put that up on Facebook, and I'm pretty sure Liz put it on Instagram with the flamingos. So if you really want to kind of go out and see a rare bird or something, they have stuff for that. This year, one of the big things that's going to drive like kind of fall migration is going to be the fires in Canada. So, I mean, you remember the smoke we had, all through the summer. That burned up a lot of the crops, and that's going to mean there's not a lot of food. So some of those guys are going to start heading this way.
So early migration then, is that what you're saying?
Actually, I don't think it'll be early, because what food there is, like birds don't say like, oh, I've got so much resource, you know what I mean? They once they run out, then they come. Okay. So it won't be early, I don't think. I think they'll eat up what's there, and then they'll come. So maybe it won't be till like November, December, or even into January of when they're going to start really showing up.
And what birds are birds starting to move through the area now then? Is that?
Yeah. So, I mean, just the first little bit of it, you got pine siskins showing up in some places, and these red crossbills, which I don't know if you've ever seen a red crossbill. I saw one. There was a little flock of them a couple years ago in the forest preserves over here, and their bills are literally crossed, and so it's really interesting. I was looking it up, and they start out straight when they're born, and then as they open more and more of these pine cones, they either turn. They call it right-handed or left-handed. Their bills bend one way or the other. Wow. Yeah, I know. So they're like They call it right-handed or left-handed, even though they don't have hands.
Well, I was gonna say I'm gonna have to keep an eye. Next year, it'll have to be something I'm actively looking for. I never would have imagined anything like that. Other birds?
So that's the red crossbill. There's also the white-winged crossbill. Those guys will probably be coming with the pine siskins, and then, the little red-breasted nuthatches we get. It's kind of weird with those guys. They start breeding in some areas around here. But those guys I don't think are going to be a big year this year. Their food supply is pretty secure. So.
All right. Backyard breeding, I know you've talked about this before. Like what food we should be putting out when you're like, no, these birds aren't around, don't feed them anymore. Or birds that are here through the winter, what we might be putting out for them. So what is your feeding, us doing our feeders look like in the fall and winter?
Yeah, so, in terms of let's talk about hummingbirds for a second. So hummingbirds, they basically, all the ones in your yard are gone. Like those guys the ones that bred in the area, they've already moved on. But we get all these other ones coming through now. And you won't really see males because the males are the first to go. But the juveniles and the females, they're going to be hanging around usually till about the middle of October. It gets kind of sporadic because you know some will migrate in, you'll have them for 4 or 5 days, and then they go, and then the next kind of crew come through. And we tell people to leave it up at least through Halloween, even though you might not see any birds for a couple of weeks. Last year we had a customer of ours who had a rufous hummingbird. So right around here we only get really one species of hummingbird, just the ruby throat. But in fall migration, these birds, if you can imagine the Rockies over here, they move east until they hit the Great Lakes, and then they go down from there. And so there's black-chinned hummingbirds, rufous hummingbirds are possibilities. You know, it's pretty rare, but at least every year you'll get 1 or 2 of these birds showing up at people's feeders. So
I was going to say, so you could still put out food for the hummingbirds, and I imagine other birds too still, right?
Yeah.
Or what else?
And it's funny because in our yard, it's always about October 15th is the last time we see a hummingbird, and it's usually the first day we see the juncos, the slate-colored, dark-eyed juncos, you know, long name, little bird. You know, that's what we do, right? We have these huge names for these little birds, but the juncos start showing up around October 15th.
Okay.
Yeah. And as far as food for those guys, for the juncos, they love just like the Niger seed. Yeah, so they love that. And actually the pine siskins that'll be moving through, that's another, they love that too.
And then there are birds here year-round, you know, and I imagine, I mean, you talked me into it last year, and you were right. We kept our feeders going through the winter. I was surprised at how much traffic we got. What birds will we see through the winter that we can still put food out for them?
Well, obviously, you know, like your chickadees, your nuthatches, your woodpeckers and stuff, which I always think is kind of interesting. A lot of the birds that we have that hang out through the year are white and black, you know. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know if it's a snow-related thing, but, you know, your downy woodpeckers and your hairy woodpeckers and your nuthatches, they're all kind of grays, blacks, and whites with your chickadees. So those guys, goldfinches, of course, are around, but they all change colors. They're all kind of that drab. They all look like females. And the pine siskins will be mixed in there, and the pine siskins aren't really super distinctive looking. They're kind of gray little jobbers that mix in with everybody else. But those guys it's fun to see them, you know, like take the time to kind of really zone in on your feeders and just look, and you'll be surprised. The other thing is that we have the house finches that are always here, and this year are going to be a good year for purple finches. And distinguishing between those two is kind of difficult, but it kind of, you know, forces you to get on your A game, you know?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so again, something to look forward to, especially keeping the feeders active through the winter, and it sounds like a pretty good variety of birds still.
Oh, yeah.
All right. How about jumping ahead then a little bit? And we talked about this before, but and just as a reminder, because I think when we're, you know, fall, we're getting ready to shut down for the winter, but we also want to help out the pollinators if we can, right? And what can we do now to set up for pollinators?
Well, I mean, what Laura and I did last year is we really set out and drew out, you know, kind of drew a little map of our yard and really focused in on where we were going to put in our plantings and kind of arranged to get the plants in. And so we did that in the front of the house, and it did so much better than I think we ever would expect it. Because usually, you know, that first year it's kind of tough. But man, our stuff took off. And so, I mean, I would say just start with a plan, you know, because if you don't plan for it, you're probably not going to do it. And then the next thing you know will be like May, and you're like too late already. So, so yeah, get going on and getting a plan together.
Okay. All right, good. So get ready for the pollinators. You can do that now. And then I'm going to hit you with some of my favorites because I want to talk about like the best birding or best birds you've seen this year so far. But how about, before we do that, any other advice, whether seasonal advice for now or heading into the winter coming back for birders or backyard birders?
Well, I don't want to step into dangerous territory here, but I mean, like, politics are happening already, you know, and it's stressful, you know, and you really got to just take time, even if it's not to see the best bird or, you know, just to take some time to be in nature. I mean, they've done all those studies that prove it really is good for your mental health. And we got some stressors coming up, you know. It's going to be a rocky road, and it's going to be a long one. So I would say my first advice is it doesn't matter if it's the best birding or the perfect bird, just do it. Just get in there, get some nature time.
Yeah, you're right. The get into nature thing, and the research out there is overwhelming how beneficial it is to just go for a walk.
Yeah.
Spend some time in the trees,
In the trees.
or underneath
Go
it,
under the trees.
walking by the trees. Yeah, so very important. And then obviously an opportunity to enjoy nature
Oh,
in
yeah,
that way
yeah,
too, and the benefits of it.
I mean, you almost never go for a walk and you're like, gosh, that was disappointing.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're always like, why don't I do this more? Why don't I spend a little bit more time, doing these things?
I would say you can go even the other. For me, it's now if I miss the walk, I
Yeah.
feel it that
Yeah.
way. So a great habit to develop. All right, so for you personally, top bird sightings in 2023. What have you seen so far? What have been your favorite sightings?
Well, I will say one thing that is really kind of shocking to me is there's these birds, the blue grosbeaks, which, I mean, you used to have to travel to southern Illinois to see these guys. Well, every year now they're breeding over at Cap Sawyer's. And so it's amazing. Liz and I went out there looking for some birds, and just to see these guys. I mean, they're just crazy, beautiful blue birds, and that now that they're breeding, they're like every year they're turning up, and they're not just there. There's other locations, throughout the region where they're coming, and those guys. It's just thrilling to see that in May show up, and you're like, I can't believe they're back. And then you just go back in June, and they're there, and they've had babies, and it's just, it's amazing. So those guys were amazing. The other thing, I don't know if you saw when you made your visits here, the sandhill cranes that were breeding here, and they were walking through the parking lot, and it caused so much stress for so many people because they're all like worried about the cars running them over or something, because it was just so crazy to see these huge birds just. I mean, it's like watching a pterodactyl walk through the parking lot. So that was really a lot of fun. And the crazy flamingo thing, it's just, it's just, but there's always something, and that's one of the great kind of benefits is like there's something unexpected out there that's going to happen. Yeah. I will say, keep your eyes, we'll try and keep you posted, but every year, there's so few whooping cranes left in the world. I mean, I want to say 200. But every year they've been laying over at Starved Rock. So, if you want to go out and take a beautiful hike over at Starved Rock, and have a chance of seeing a whooping crane, that's pretty amazing.
Okay. I say a lot of great, suggestions here. I mean, one is for the backyard birders, but certainly in the area with all the forest reserves, and Starved Rock is not that far away. A lot of great opportunity. Well, Mel, thank you very much. This is all. I always look forward to talking to you. The birding thing I'm amazed by it, all the varieties and the colors and the movement. Yeah, a lot of fun. Thank you, Mel.
I'm hoping for a snowy owl this year.
Really?
Yeah,
in our area?
It's been a couple of years, so hopefully we'll get a push through of these snowy owls.
All right.
That's my hope for the year.
And if something happens, we'll see it on your Instagram or Facebook?
For sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, look for that then. Check them out on Facebook and Instagram. Mel, thank you very much. I'm Dave Wierzal, and you've been watching Spotlight. Today's Spotlight has been on birding in the fall and winter of 2023, and we've been at Wild Birds Unlimited talking with Mel Tracy. Thank you for watching.